our job is to get you what's called just compensation for that, which is the other requirement. So the first requirement is public purpose or public use. The second is that you are justly compensated for the taking of your property. And if both of those things are done, then our laws say that it's okay. So
welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, my friend?
It's going great. Can't complain. 2023 is treating us right here. Our business is going well. I'm looking forward to seeing what the rest of the year holds. But what about you, Raphael? How's it going over there?
It's going great. Starting off the year with a bang. Everyone says that, the economy is kind of in flux right now, but I'm not seeing it, at least in our neck of the woods. And I'm sure, our guests can provide some context to that as well. Anthony DellaPelle, is that correct? I just want to make sure that.
Good job.
Yeah, of course. No, actually, I'm half Italian myself. My mom, I was born in Northeast Italy. My mom's Italian. So my mom's surname is Pigozzo. So it's nice to meet another fellow Italian. But Anthony actually is an owner or a partner as well in a law firm out of New Jersey, and we're really excited to have him on the show to learn a little bit more what he does. And obviously, it's going to be a really interesting discussion today. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to be with you today.
Absolutely. So
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. So one of the things we like to do when we first get started is we like to learn a little bit more about the person that's across the table from us. So if you don't mind kind of sharing a little bit about your backstory, I think that'd be great.
Sure. I'll try to give you a quick overview. I've been practicing law. This is my 36th year, based in northern New Jersey. Also admitted to practice in New York, but I haven't stepped foot in a New York courtroom in more than 30 years. And I've pretty much done soup to nuts everything that has to do with real estate over the course of my career. When I went to college, I thought I was going to be a doctor, and I gave that up pretty quickly. And I thought I would go into the real estate business itself because my dad was a real estate broker. But then I decided to go to law school, and like many people my generation, we went to school at night and had jobs during the day to put ourselves through school. And my jobs were in real estate. I was a real estate paralegal. I was a title searcher. I ended up becoming a law clerk in a firm that did real estate transactions. And it led to me, once I became a lawyer, doing, initially I did a lot of transactional real estate, a lot of closings for residential properties, a lot of lease transactions. I grew into working on land use, entitlement, zoning matters. And over the course of my first 10 or 15 years, that was basically what I did. But in the mid-90s, I decided I didn't like sitting at a desk, and I liked being in court, and I didn't like going to planning board and board of adjustment meetings at night, which is the way we have them here in New Jersey, especially because I had two young children at home. And I found a way to do that by changing my practice. I had always done eminent domain work and real estate tax appeal work at my former law firm, which was a larger general practice firm. But I had an opportunity to join my current firm in the mid-90s, and that's all we do here. So we're a small firm that's been around since the 1960s that limits its practice to eminent domain and redevelopment law in New Jersey only, and we also do real estate tax appeal work. So that is litigation. We do transactions if we settle our matters, but we don't handle normal lease transactions or purchase or sale transactions unless they are in lieu of a taking by eminent domain. Most of the cases that we work on involve real estate valuation issues. And in my state of New Jersey, it's very active to see the private market working with local governments and doing what we call local redevelopment projects, where the government can take property from you with my money and give it to me so that I can achieve redevelopment of that property or those properties in the area. It's meant to really cure blight. And it's done that in some areas of New Jersey. If you've been to New York City and you look across the Hudson River and you see all the high rises in places like Hoboken and Jersey City, most of those are the results of local redevelopment projects, and many of them involved eminent domain where properties were taken. So, and that's basically, my professional background in my firm is that I run our eminent domain practice, and it's statewide. We don't go out of state, but we are part of referral networks nationally, so I can help people around the country if they have a taking of their property and find them the right lawyer. I'm also a member of a couple of other organizations, which I'll be happy to talk about in just a moment. But that's, in a nutshell, that's what I do.
That's amazing. No, and it's interesting you say that you specialize just in New Jersey. I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the laws pertaining to eminent domain are not necessarily national, correct? Are they specific based on municipalities that you're in?
Well, there are some similarities because the law of the land in the United States is based upon our Constitution.
Sure.
And that provides that eminent domain can only be used if there are two circumstances that it satisfies. First, there has to be a public use or public purpose for the taking of a piece of property. So most people think of it traditionally involving, you have highway property, state highway property. You own a shopping center there if you're in the commercial real estate business, and they're going to widen the highway. They're gonna take 10 feet of your frontage and ruin a row of your parking. That's a partial taking. Our job is to get you what's called just compensation for that, which is the other requirement. So the first requirement is public purpose or public use. The second is that you are justly compensated for the taking of your property. And if both of those things are done, then our laws say that it's okay. So you have to comply with those federal mandates, and then every state will have its own laws. We have found over the years that the substantive law of how you of how you get compensated and what the principles are very similar from state to state. There are some differences. The procedures are very different from state to state. So we have our own set of special court rules, our own statute here in New Jersey. In New York, they have a totally different process. We have juries decide in New Jersey how much money you get when your property is taken. In New York, a judge decides it. So there are differences in those regards from state to state as well.
Interesting.
Oh, wow. Yeah. We actually have something that might be coming to pass from, like you said, an eminent domain with the two things. One is two interstates. They're trying to connect them, and they're going to be taking a lot of land to connect, to just make a road to speed things up through there. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see that come to fruition.
Yeah, here in Louisville, yeah, they're talking about connecting two interstates because it's kind of difficult in here to move and connect with the other interstates. So it would make almost sense to create a road running right through that will shorten the time frame for travel. And so sure. I'm sure that's happened a lot. I know when I lived in DC, the expansion of the railway out to Dulles. I know that was a big project that they had been working on for a long time, and then they had proposed like a purple belt, which was like going to be a big belt that was going to connect a bunch of the railways in DC. And I don't know if that's still, working. We're still working towards that, but they were talking about that when I was there in 2014. So it's kind of interesting. Well,
the infrastructure projects take quite a bit of time. President Biden signed that infrastructure bill last November, I guess, over a year ago.
Yeah.
$1.2 trillion in infrastructure spending, biggest one ever. Those projects probably don't result in takings by eminent domain for at least a few years or several years or more. So, in fact, my firm was created because of President Eisenhower's infrastructure spending, which led to the interstate highway system, which started in the 50s. And my firm was created in 1967. And there was still quite a bit in my state of taking work for state highways and interstate highways 12 years later. So
that's super fascinating.
Yeah. So can you go over and kind of elaborate on the day-to-day life inside your firm, what you do per se, and then what maybe some other colleagues do for the firm?
Sure. We have 7 full-time lawyers, and we're pretty much split 50-50 on the work that we do, even though the substance of the work always focuses on the real estate, its use and its value. But if you wanted to pursue a property tax appeal in a state like mine, property taxes are very expensive. A pretty, middle income home can carry property taxes between $20,000 and $50,000 a year, depending upon where it's located. So, we can save people money on their property tax bills. For commercial property, the savings can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. So one of the things that we do there is we'll evaluate whether the assessment that generates the tax bill is fair or not. And does it represent a fair representation of the value of the property as of whatever the date is used for that assessment? And if so, we can file an appeal and hopefully reduce the assessment and bring down the property tax burden. So, for a homeowner, it's a big deal. For a commercial property owner, business owner, it's going to be probably, their second biggest expense. If they have mortgage debt, that's the first one usually. And then we have the property tax bill. And if we can save people money on those expenses, that usually goes right into their pocket and helps the bottom line quite a bit. So if you own an apartment building and we can bring it down, that's great. If you have a dark retail center, which there are quite a few of around the country, those are not going to be assessed typically as if they're empty, because you have to look at the useful life of the property, and they might be assessed using a 20 or 25 or a 30% vacancy, which is how they're valued using what we call an income capitalization approach. So we'll take a look at that. We'll decide if we think it looks like a good case. We'll turn the case away if we don't think we can help, and we do that for free. And then if we take the case, we're engaged by the client and then undertake the appeal process. In my state, commercial appeals can take several years to resolve. So you have to kind of have, some staying power to stay in it, and you have to pay the taxes at the assessed rate while you're appealing, but then you get a nice refund with interest if you win. So that's pretty good. The eminent domain side is a little different, because that typically represents situations where people don't think they have a choice, because the government will come and say that they're going to take their property and do an appraisal and tell the owner how much they think they're entitled to. And if they're going to take your house, you pretty much know what your house is worth. But if you own let's say you own a shopping center and it's worth $5 million, and they're going to take 23 parking spaces away, very few people, even real estate people with a lot of experience, can tell you how much you're entitled to, because that taking causes consequences to what we call the remainder. It creates impacts to the remainder. And so we'll work with appraisers to figure that out, and then determine whether the government is acting fairly or not. In my experience, it's very rare that the offer that you get to begin with is going to represent fair compensation. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in business. And if we do disagree, we try to negotiate a resolution with the government. And if we can't, they can then go to condemnation and take the property rights, and then we fight about how much money they get. So, obviously we have cases that involve many millions of dollars of dispute, which aren't easy to resolve. I just settled one involving a farm near Princeton, New Jersey, that the government had offered, I think it was $1.7 million for this farm, and we settled it for $3.5 million. So, that's a big deal. And that was a family holding. It wasn't big business. It wasn't Fortune 500 company, even though we've represented those. It meant everything in the world to the two individuals. Their father had been the farmer, and he passed away, and this was the estate. So we were really happy to be able to wrap that one up and resolve it without having to go to trial. But ultimately, the process here, at least for the eminent domain cases, involves 3 different phases, and they're litigation. The first phase is the court is going to focus on whether the government can take the property, does it have the right to, and has it properly exercised its eminent domain powers. That's over really quickly. Then the second phase is a non-binding arbitration hearing. I had one this morning. That's why I'm dressed a little bit like a lawyer today. I took my tie off. I hope that's okay with you guys.
Perfect. Yeah.
And that arbitration hearing, the arbitrators will decide how much money you get, what we call just compensation. And then if either or both parties are not satisfied with that, you can go back to court and you get a jury trial. So I have a jury trial in 2 weeks. We're going back to court in New Jersey again now. It took a while to get through the pandemic, and there were very few jury trials because most lawyers and clients don't want to do jury trials by Zoom. We like to do them in person so you can see a witness and understand whether they're a little nervous about the testimony that they're providing or confident about it, and you can assess their credibility better. So I have one in 2 weeks that involves 2.5 acres of beachfront on the Jersey Shore, and it's just a beach. So we're trying to figure out, what is that worth? How much is that beach worth? And we've involved in just about every kind of property valuation, from the tiniest little piece of property to the most significant, biggest, complicated valuation assignment. And one of the neat things about my job is that I not only get to understand how to value the real estate, I get to learn about the businesses. Because if it's a commercial property, We represented several years ago a commercial national brand hot dog manufacturer, and one of their factories was being taken, and we had to figure out how to value that factory, which had a lot of special machinery and equipment in it, and it had to be relocated from one place to another. They went from New Jersey to the Bronx, and put the equipment there, and that's part of the compensation that they get to relocate their equipment. I find that it's really fascinating to really get inside of the inner workings of a piece of real estate, whether it's an apartment complex and how that's valued, or a factory, or a mall, or we've done amusement park valuations over the years, hotels. All these things raise very interesting issues. It makes you understand a lot of different aspects of the real estate business and the development business, and that's where I think my background in the other facets of real estate really came in handy here. Because I spent a lot of time getting people approvals, developers, to develop real estate, and knew what they had to go through, and understood what the hurdles were, and especially in a highly regulated state like mine, where it's not easy. So we'd like to think that we level the playing field and make it fair for people that don't think they have a choice to fight the government. And hopefully at the end of the case, they are as happy as they are when they first met us, and we got them a good result. So we get hugs. Sometimes clients have cried because they're so happy that they feel as if they were treated fairly at the end of the day. It's a really nice, rewarding feeling, and it's one of the reasons why I actually enjoy practicing law in this field, because I really do feel that we're helping our clients.
Absolutely. No, and like you had mentioned, the discrepancy between what the government offered for the farm and what you're ultimately able to get them. I mean, that's life-changing for those individuals, that it's going to be something that they can pass along to their kids, at least the proceeds, or maybe they decide to go out and buy something else that serves them better as well. So, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And what's interesting, what you said regarding the remainder, I guess that's probably the nuances that you're referencing. Like, how do you, I mean, in a situation like a hot dog manufacturer, like what, I mean, in this case, they took everything, but in the case where, let's say they had to take, a part of the parking lot, I guess, how would you determine, what's that process look like for determining
Sure.
what the impact's going to look like?
Well, to try to explain an easier example, let's use a shopping center, which is,
Sure, yeah.
Everyone knows what it's like, right? So let's say you have a shopping center, certain number of square feet of buildings. It's a strip center. There's 8 stores in it with a small anchor, and they've got 2 rows of parking in front of the building. And now there's a widening, and they're going to lose one of them. They're going to lose 50% of their parking supply. Okay, so in real life, what's going to happen is there's not going to be enough parking, and the tenants who need the parking are going to leave. And now you're going to have to try to find other tenants who don't need a lot of parking. So we've seen retail centers convert from uses that are very heavy traffic oriented, like fast food convenience stores, to carpet stores, furniture stores, piano stores, right? How many people do you see in a furniture store at one time compared to how many people go into a convenience store, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and those users, not surprisingly, they pay less money in rent than the high traffic users. So
Absolutely.
it could change the use of the property. And if it was worth $5 million because you were renting the retail space at $25 a square foot, and you plug that into your valuation formula, and now you can only rent it for $18 a square foot, you figure out how much less valuable it is. It may be, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with appraisal theory,
Sure,
but
yeah.
might have a higher capitalization rate for a more risky property, and that lowers the value too. So the difference between what it was worth and what the remainder is now worth is what your just compensation is. It could be, in a case like that, it could cause $1 million of damages. It might be more. I had cases several years back. Our prime retail corridor in northern New Jersey, at least for many people, is thought to be Paramus, New Jersey. It's Bergen County. It's right near New York City. It's next to the GW Bridge, and the state highway department did a series of improvements there, which required widenings on the 2 major state highways that were there. And some people lost all their parking. So how would you operate a building without any parking? Well, think about what you do. Maybe you have to knock down the building and build a new one, or chop down some of it, and then you have to bring an architect in to figure out how to redesign it. And the costs that you incur to make yourself whole are part of your compensation package. So in the case of lost parking, if you were fortunate enough to own extra land, which most people who own commercial property in a state like mine don't have the luxury of, but you might be able to rebuild some of that parking somewhere else on your property. and go get it approved and spend the money on the engineers and the surveyors and then build it, right? Pave it, stripe it. But if the parking that you had was in the front and now it's in the back, the property still probably is not as valuable, and that would represent an incomplete cure or a partial cure for the damages instead of a total cure. So those are the kinds of things that we look at. We've had people buy their neighbor's property to make themselves whole, and that cost is factored in. We've had people lease other properties, and then they don't control it, right? But they still need it. So if you have a hotel and you lose your parking lot, you need a place for your people to park your cars. What are you going to do? Build a parking deck if you had surface parking on what's left, or buy your neighbor's property. So those kinds of things, they're real estate problems that takings can cause. And partial takings are more complicated because while most people don't want their property taken at all, and they certainly don't want all of their property taken, it's actually a little easier to get your hands around what the remedies are if they take the whole thing. When they take part of it, it's a little more complicated and the remedies are more diverse. And I find that it requires a lot more effort to figure out how to make people whole for that.
Absolutely. And the way that the judicial system structured in your particular, municipality, if it's a jury trial, you're convincing a group of individuals, you're essentially providing credence as to why this particular valuation or whatever you deem to be acceptable compensation needs to be that way. So if you're trying to pursue this on your own and say, hey, this is what I think the damages should be, without having, a formulation of exactly what could potentially be the issue, I'm sure that causes, essentially what that means is undertaking it by yourself is probably not a smart idea. Because
well, think about if you're a juror too, right?
Yeah.
Jurors by design aren't supposed to be experts in the subject matter of the case. And the last jury trial I had before the pandemic was just before the beginning of the pandemic. It was the end of February 2020. It involved a 200,000 square foot shopping center on a state highway in central New Jersey, very heavily traveled. The town was taking part of the parking lot to build essentially a park and ride for its residents to take the commuter buses into New York City. And they were taking, I don't remember the exact numbers, but approximately 70 of 400 parking spaces in an improved shopping center. So how do you value that? Do you think that people off the street can just do that? And think about a jury trying to figure that out right now. So our job is to try to make it easy and simple for them, and hope that you have good consultants to work with you to explain things well as good witnesses. And these very arcane, sometimes boring and dry subjects have to be presented in such a way as the jury doesn't fall asleep and they have interest. And I find that the jurors in our cases really do care, because they realize that this is something that it's one of the few instances that I can think of where no one did anything wrong in a lawsuit, right? Here I am going along, managing my real estate, trying to collect my rent every day, and now the state is going to come and destroy my property, at least so I say. But I didn't do anything wrong. I just happened to be in the wrong place. And I'm not accused of doing anything wrong. And the job the jury has is to just try to make the situation right, knowing that it's an involuntary situation. And I really feel that they do care. They understand it's a constitutional law issue, and we try to remind them of that. Even big property owners, the big companies, the big retail companies, the Fortune 500, the insurance companies, the REITs, they're entitled to be paid just compensation too, not just the mom and pop businesses or the individuals. So, we have to do that, explain to the jury, and they usually get it. We have a lot of faith in the jury process.
That's awesome. No, that's a great point. So one thing I'm kind of curious about is you mentioned redevelopment. So the group of individuals who listen to the podcast, we have a wide range of individuals. We have brokers, we have real estate investors, developers. We've even interviewed people that are CEOs of technology companies that are focused on the commercial real estate industry. So it's a very diverse group of individuals. Lawyers, we've had several lawyers from all across the country to talk about different topics. One thing that is an interesting topic, or one that comes up all the time, is the redevelopment process. Obviously, there's a lot of nuances to it. So as far as, clients that you've worked with in the past to undertake redevelopment or adaptive reuse, as some people like to describe it, what are some of the legal risks that you kind of encourage people to consider as they're going through that process?
Well, from state to state, the laws are very different. Some states,
Sure.
While they allow private redevelopment, they've outlawed government-sponsored redevelopment where there is the use of eminent domain. After a case got to the U.S. Supreme Court in 2005 called Kelo versus New London, which got some notoriety, and they made a movie about it, and had to do with whether the city of New London, Connecticut, could take private properties on the Long Island Sound and take them so that a redevelopment project could occur to be a sister project to a research facility for Pfizer, the pharmaceutical company. That was already built. Now they wanted to have housing and hotels and restaurants next to it, and they were taking people's property. So that got up to the U.S. Supreme Court in June of 2005. The court deferred to state law in Connecticut, which actually allowed the takings, which created a fairly big amount of fallout in the country. People realized for the first time that maybe the property could be taken so someone else could make a profit off of it, not so they could build a school or park or road. And the laws tightened. So in many states, they either further restricted or eliminated the ability to do redevelopment takings, even though I could buy your old factory from you if I wanted to pay you a fair price for it and knock it down and build apartments, which happens a lot, right? Especially in an urban state like mine. In my state, we didn't outlaw redevelopment. And in fact, the law, it evolved a little bit, and we made some changes to it in 2013. I actually participated in drafting that legislation, which was kind of fun. First time I ever did that, where we put some safeguards in for property owners. But what we have now, it's very common that what we have is similar to the laws in other densely populated and urbanized states. We can use eminent domain. Towns and local redevelopment agencies can use eminent domain to take property if the property is in an area that satisfies the blight criteria under our legislation in our state. And some of the things you might think are pretty obvious. If there's a bunch of old abandoned properties, they're boarded up, and there's criminal activity there, that kind of stuff, that might be blight, right? But other things are more questionable. Is a shopping center or an office building that was developed in the 1950s, is it blighted just because you wouldn't build it the same way and wouldn't have the same parking ratios that you might have today? Some of the cases that we were involved what we would consider to be stretches of the application of that statutory criteria. So that's why people were fighting. But our law says if it's blighted, you can designate it. It's a local planning process. So there is a hearing, and people can show up and say, no, my property is not blighted and my area is not blighted, and here's why. But if it gets designated, unless that designation is challenged in a separate lawsuit, the government can then go and move forward with a redevelopment plan, which creates new zoning for the property and creates zoning incentives for the property in places like our side of New York City. The bonuses are in density to go up, get more height, build more apartments, right? And you also get financial incentives, at least in my state. There are long-term tax abatements that are allowed for 30 years in redevelopment areas that you can't get outside of redevelopment areas. So they're kickstarting the private sector by taking something that's bad, blight, and making it good, not blight. Most of those projects, at least in New Jersey and New York, are near mass transit, and they've resulted in some successes. I mean, I'm not going to misrepresent that to your audience. We have had some really good projects near Rutgers University, which is in New Brunswick, New Jersey, central New Jersey. There's massive redevelopment projects there, and they've really done a great job of partnering the university, which is publicly owned, public university, state university. There's a massive healthcare entity there called the Robert Woods Johnson hospital system. And we also have Johnson & Johnson, a big corporate partner. So think about those three employment generators. And then you had pockets of blight in different places in between them. So eminent domain was used in some of those instances and revitalized those areas and made them better. And some of the people that did those projects got those tax incentives that you talk about. So, but it's state-sponsored projects implemented at a local level. I would tell you that right now, I think that one of the bigger issues that we're seeing, at least since we came out of the recession 10 or 15 years ago, whenever you say it started, is in the redevelopment areas that existed back then. A lot of them are still there and haven't been redeveloped yet. And in some of those cases, we are seeing fights between property owners who want to be the redeveloper of their own property or bought it to redevelop it, but they can't because, at least in my state, the town has the ability to designate a specific party as the designated redeveloper, and they become the only party who has the right to develop the property. So you can own it, but you can't develop it. And that's problematic for a lot of people, as you might imagine. So we're involved in current disputes involving those very issues right now in places near mass transit in the New York City suburbs.
Oh wow, that's interesting. So essentially, at that point, when they claim eminent domain on these properties, they can take possession, give just compensation, and then modify the zoning and create whatever incentive packages they want to incentivize developers to come in to perform whatever projects. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's
exactly.
awesome. Yeah, and I feel like that happens. That process is obviously different depending on which municipality you're in, but you see it in a lot of different areas around the country. I know when I went to Arizona State University, and there was a similar eminent domain project that occurred where there was a northern section of the campus that had a lot of the fraternity housing and everything else that was off campus theoretically, but they were able to claim eminent domain, took over that area, leveled everything, and then a developer came in and built up new projects, and now it's housing that's theoretically just off campus, but it was a big deal for the area. So that's just one example. I'm sure there's examples all across the country for that being the case. So, but
I kind of want to dive back down into the tax appeal process and if there's an actual benefit or benefits of pursuing that actual strategy. I know you kind of touched base a little of it earlier, but I'd like to kind of dive a little bit more into that. It's kind of intriguing to me. So,
well, it really depends whether you're a commercial real estate owner or investor, or it just concerns your residents.
okay,
They're two different animals, even though the issues are the same. The properties are going to be valued differently in those instances. But we have a series of measures in place here that are checks and balances on the party's abilities to do things. So, for instance, in my state, you can't be what's called spot assessed. So if I buy your house for $2 million, but it's assessed at $500,000, the tax assessor can't raise it to $2 million just on the basis of the purchase. That would be a spot assessment. But towns are allowed to reassess and revalue classes of properties in bunches. And if they know that the market is changing rapidly, which in some cases it certainly has in the past 10 years or so, they can do a reassessment. And then to take care of how the market changes that impact the assessments over the course of those intervening years, we actually use what's called an equalization ratio to translate the assessment, which is not changed every year, to the market value, which does change every year. So an easy example, in my town, we did a reassessment, I guess it was about 10 years ago, and we did quite a few residential tax appeals, and some of the houses were selling for $200,000 or $300,000, some of $2 million, right? And there's a whole gamut of values in a town like I live in, which is a pretty prototypical, middle class suburb. We had friends who lived in our neighborhood or around the corner, and we said, "Hey, we can save you some money on tax appeals for your property." And one of my friends happened to be a financial advisor who was a real estate investor, very sharp guy. He said, "Why should I appeal my property taxes? Because my house is worth $900,000. I'm only assessed at $700,000." And I said to him, "Hey, do you know what the equalization ratio is?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, there's a percentage that is used to take your 700 and tell you what that means it's worth. And when I apply the ratio to your home, the tax assessor is assessing it as if it's worth $1.3 million." So we filed an appeal, and we saved him $7,500 a year in his property taxes.
wow,
Right. So it's more than what you initially think, and you have to understand the procedures. If it's a commercial property, this is very common. It's not just in my state. And you are an income producing property, and the tax assessor sends you a notice that says they want you to disclose your income and expense information. If you don't respond, you can't file a tax appeal. And if you do, they'll get it dismissed. So those procedural pitfalls are very common. I just had a situation on Tuesday of this week. Most of the appeals in my state have to be filed before April 1st of every year, but there are 3 counties out of our 26 counties where you have to file by January 15th. It's just a little weird, nuance. And it just so happened on I guess it would have been Monday night, because Monday was the 16th. I got an email saying I want to file an appeal in my house. And we knew it was in one of those counties that the deadline, it happened to be the 17th because 15th was a Sunday and 16th was a holiday, MLK Day, right? So he didn't know. He didn't know the deadline was like 12 hours later. So we had to really jump on that one and find out whether there was a good case or not. So, but if you wait and you don't file on time, you're out of luck. You got to wait until next year. So there are other types of procedures that really can drown you. And it's one of the reasons why we always recommend that people who are interested in fighting the government, whether it's a condemnation matter, where the property is taken, or it's a tax appeal where they're just trying to be treated fairly on the tax system, you got to have someone who knows what they're doing. And there aren't a lot of people that do this regularly, both on the lawyer's end and the real estate appraiser or assessor's end. It's a very small community from state to state. And most of us not only know each other within the state, but we know each other nationally, and we can help our clients if they need help in other places. So I really strongly recommend that anybody who has one of these situations or is thinking about it, don't just try to do it on your own. You could end up worse off, and then you wasted your time, and you might be worse off financially, and you might not be able to fix it. If it's a tax appeal, you could wait another year, at least in my state, right? You're never going to get that money back. So,
I had a question about the reassessments. And are they doing within your state? Obviously, do they go in and reassess the whole street, or is it actually the whole neighborhood?
Whole town, usually.
The whole town. Oh, okay.
Right. And if you think about it, that costs a lot of money to pay someone to do that, right? So they don't do it every year. They might do it every 10 years, every 5 years. But the state division of taxation has the power to order a town to do it. So we have a city, Elizabeth, New Jersey. It's right next to Newark Airport. And Elizabeth, I don't know exactly what it is, but that ratio that I talked about had been like 11%. Meaning if you have a property assessed at $100,000, it's being carried on the books as if it's worth over $1 million, because you take the assessment and you divide it by the ratio. So it'll be 100,000 divided by 0.11, get you over $1 million, right?
Wow.
So any small change in the assessment represented a significant difference in the value implications of the properties. And it means that there's a greater likelihood that the assessment is incorrect. So the state has the power to order towns and cities to do that. And some of the older cities have fought those orders over the years. And then they pay the lawyers to litigate those things instead of paying the appraisers to do the revaluations and the reassessments. But it's typically a town-wide thing. And some of the towns and some of the communities here in my state are doing annual reassessments. They've got it down, so it doesn't cost them a lot, as much as it would to be to hire someone once every 10 years. So that's the way they're doing it.
That makes sense.
It's interesting. Yeah,
definitely. So one of the things that I'd love to ask you about, and this is kind of affiliated based on some of your affiliations, is one is the CRE designation. Obviously you hold this designation, and you've been involved with the organization for quite some time. So I'm kind of curious if you could elaborate what exactly is the CRE designation, and then maybe if you could elaborate a little bit on how it's impacted you in your career.
Sure. The CRE designation stands for someone who's a designated member of the councils of real estate. And we have about 1,000 members around the world. You have to be invited to become a member. We have members in, I think, 21 countries. It is multidisciplinary, which makes us somewhat unique. We have over 60 professional disciplines represented within the organization. So, it's called the councils of real estate, and there's about 1,000 of us. There's only about 75 or 80 lawyers who are counselors, right? Mm-hmm. The criteria essentially are that you have to be have to be in a real estate advising role where you are counseling people on how to solve their real estate problems. You have to have done it for at least 10 years to qualify. You have to be accepted through a pretty rigorous application and interview process and provide evidence of your counseling. So, like for me, when I was first asked to consider becoming a member, most of the people I knew that were CREs were real estate appraisers. And they said, we have this whole membership drive going, and we really want to expand the professional diversity that we have within the organization. We need more lawyers, and we think you'd be a good candidate. So I said, hey, I'm a trial lawyer. I just tried condemnation cases and property tax cases. And we're like, well, but when you don't try a case, you're giving advice on how to solve problems. So I thought about that and applied and was very fortunate to be extended membership. It was about 15 years ago or so. I've gotten very involved in the organization, which I think is wonderful. We have people that are at the top of their profession in just about every type of real estate business. People who are asset managers for REITs, for insurance companies, for the large financial institutions. We have a large group of PhD economists who are giving advice to their own companies and to outside interests. You'll probably read a lot of the things that they write. We just had a webinar with I think 7 of our members who are PhDs. We have an economic advisory council talking about what's going on with the Fed and interest rates and the cost of debt and how it's affected the capital stack and all these really interesting things that can affect us on a day-to-day basis. There are other lawyers, there are real estate appraisers, engineers, accountants. We have property managers, people that have other designations like the SIOR. There are brokers that are also CREs. I think you've interviewed my friend Mark Duclos probably last year. He was the chair of the SIORs. He's also a CRE, right?
Oh, nice.
People from IREM that are property management, they're involved in our organization. So what it does really is it gives our members access to some of the, I think some of the top minds in the business around the world. If I need help for someone who has an interest in Asia, we have members in Korea and Japan and Australia and South Africa now, and we have a pretty vibrant European chapter. So here I am in this small town New Jersey, tiny little state, only do work in New Jersey. And I've had clients in the past 5 years who are real estate investors from, 10, 12 different countries in Asia, right? So they might have gotten to me because they knew a CRE in their country. It really provides us with access to information, knowledge, resources that we wouldn't otherwise have. And 2 of the things that I think stand out for the organization, aside from the quality and the caliber of the members, are that we have a foundation that's been endowed by our members over the years and provide scholarship and other opportunities for people who need money, having to do with pursuits in real estate or real estate related pursuits. But the one that's really at the top of the list, in my view, in the past several years that I underappreciated until recently is we have something called the Consulting Corps. Our Consulting Corps consists of what I call SWAT teams of our members who go out on assignment for about a week at a time somewhere in the country. I don't think we've gone out of the country yet. And we purposely pick people who match the assignment that can help. And we offer our help usually at no charge or a very minimal charge just to defray some of the costs to local governments, to nonprofits. Most recently, 2 things that come to mind, assignments where we sent a team out last year to Paradise, California. Remember what happened there where the town burned down? And they had to rebuild the whole town. So we sent out developers, planners, people in corporate finance who could figure out how to put some money together with the public sector and created a plan for them and met with the mayor and the council there to provide them with opportunities. We've most recently been in Fort Myers, Florida, after the Hurricane Ian that devastated the Gulf Coast there, and both met virtually and in person with a lot of the stakeholders there to give them the benefit of our thinking. And any one of our members who has been involved in one of these assignments has come back just so happy that they agreed to donate their time. I just did a small assignment in Boston where we were trying to find housing opportunities for a nonprofit that provided housing for the homeless. And it was just a half-a-day assignment. It wasn't a 5-day assignment, but it made me feel so good that we figured out ways that we could help this nonprofit secure housing for people that really needed it. And it's a great program that makes us unique, and it's easy to apply if anyone who has interest. We've taken old psychiatric hospitals or underutilized healthcare facilities that might be government owned or sponsored and turn them around, or other government buildings, small colleges that get gobbled up because they can't make their budgets or get bought by a bigger one. What do you do with that property? What do you do with it? Try to figure it out. So that's part of the deal, and it's a great initiative that we do. I'm actually in the leadership of the organization now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure how that happened, but next year I'll be the chair of the organization. I'm the first vice chair this year. So I get to really get my sleeves rolled up and try to help us help others, and really gotten a lot out of it. Enjoy it very much.
Sounds like a great organization. I mean, you guys going out and taking your time and just giving back, that's says a lot. So I'm sure that you guys are practically moving mountains with everyone on it that's in the CRE recognition. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, with
you
the
know,
time.
we don't all agree on everything. It's interesting because we're so diverse that the Economic Council presentation, a lot of these are available to the public at no charge, so we can put you on the list if you're interested. But you know, they had really differing opinions as to what was going to happen, what the Fed was going to do, how it was going to impact certain markets, you know, sectors of the market. Everybody seems to still be bullish on housing, and I know why. Obviously, some people aren't, and I think, like my experience in trying cases with a jury, the fact that you put a bunch of people together with different life experiences and different qualities and characteristics, there's a synergy when they come together. And our group of counselors, I think, does that in the real estate business, and that's one of the reasons why we can be very successful. If I need an answer to a question, I have an opportunity as a member to put out a request. I'll get 20 responses within hours, and more than half of them will be valuable to me. And the people that are sending that to me aren't looking to get paid. They want to help me because they know I can help them down the road somewhere. So I find that it's a lot more rewarding than I thought. I thought it when I joined it. It was just a place where people wanted to get extra letters after their name, but it's really a meaningful, valuable organization, and I'm really thrilled to be affiliated with it and honored to be, you know, part of the leadership.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, and I'm sure the organization is thankful that you're willing to step up and take on that chair role, because I know I'm sure it comes along with responsibility, and you know it helps with the guidance of the organization going forward. So
yeah, one of the things that I'll get to do next year is we have a top 10 issues in real estate that we create and publish every year, and I'll be going around the country delivering that on podcasts like this and writing articles about it. So you know, I have to manage my business, but my partner told me it was okay if I did it just for a year. He'll mind the store while I'm out on the road, and it's a great compilation of our database and our knowledge that we come up with every year to try to forecast what we think matters to those people in the various aspects of the real estate business.
the value of that, oh my, that's going to be a great journey for the next year for yourself and then everyone else. So yeah, I have to catch up next year and see how that goes, how it went.
That's
for
right.
you. So, yeah.
See if the predictions were correct or not.
Correct.
I figure,
Yeah,
hey,
exactly.
in baseball, if you fail 70% of the time, you're still the best, right?
That's
So
right.
we got to be better than that. We have to get at least 4 out of 10.
Yeah, you got to bat a little bit better.
That's right.
It was a pleasure, Anthony, to have you on the podcast. As we start rounding it out, the podcast here, I know Raphael and myself are avid readers, and this is one of the questions we ask every guest, and it's what is the most impactful book that you've ever read? And it doesn't have to pertain to law or commercial real estate. It could just be something that's changed your trajectory of
Is
your
it
life.
okay if I give you maybe 2 different suggestions?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would tell you that maybe there's 3. I would say from a business perspective, the 2 that I read most recently that had the most meaning to me were The Go-Giver, which I really thought was really powerful in its message of how giving can reward you instead of just expecting to receive. And the other is Who, Not How, which I find as a business owner is important to understand how to try to make the right decisions using the right people instead of doing everything yourself, especially if you own or manage a small business, which it's very easy to get sucked into the daily grind, and it may not be the best thing for your business. So I recommend both of those to your audience. The one that's a little bit of a wild card, it's not a promotion for me, but I have a childhood friend who's a famous author, and he wrote a book that became a bestseller and is a Netflix miniseries, and part of it is about one of my cases, which is pretty cool. So it's called The Stranger, and the author's name is Harlan Coben, and it was a New York Times bestseller probably 10 years ago, and the protagonist in the in the novel is a lawyer named Adam Price, who's an eminent domain lawyer. And the book actually features a couple of my cases. The show, a Netflix series, features one of them. It was a redevelopment project where someone was having his house taken by a private developer. So that kind of had stars all over it for me, because it was my case that came to life on first in print and then the big screen, which I obviously got a lot out of. And then I got to call my friend and tell him that he messed it up, and he blamed it on the screenplayers.
That's so funny.
You did it all wrong.
That's awesome. I'll echo the Who Not How book. I mean, that's a game-changing book. Because especially, you know, anyone who, you know, is a perfectionist per se, someone who feels like they need to be in control of everything so that it's done just exactly right. In my opinion, that's a flaw. That's you cannot possibly scale or operate it with any sort of you know, resiliency without incorporating someone into your business that could take some of the burden off of you. And not only that, but most of the time you could probably find someone who could do the work way better than you could ever do it. So, you know, so a lot of that is just a mindset shift, and then, you know, taking the leap and then working through it. So,
yep, agreed. I really enjoyed it and made a difference to me. So
that's awesome. Well, Anthony, we greatly appreciate your time. We thank you so much for stopping by today. One thing we like to do at the end of our podcast episode is we like to ask our guests to contribute something to what we call the commercial real estate treasure chest. It's a repository of resources that we make available to our audience. And a lot of times we have, you know, people contribute helpful PDFs, Excel sheets, really anything that they feel would be of value to the audience. So if you don't mind kind of sharing what you're willing to share.
Sure. Well, first of all, if anyone wants to understand either the eminent domain process or property tax process, even if it's not in my state, I'd be happy to respond. I assume that the contact info would be in the show notes for this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I have a long last name and it would take too long to tell you my email address. But my website also is an easy way to get a hold of me. It's mrod.law. That's a short one. The other thing I can do is I can share with you in your treasure chest some of the CRE resources. So the top 10 is a PDF, for instance. And we also have a repository of articles in a magazine that we publish called Real Estate Issues, which has, you want to know something about something in real estate, we wrote about it. I mean, I did an edition of it, special edition, on how to value energy carters and the impacts it has when you build power lines next to houses, right? And I got people from all different sectors of the real estate and energy business to do that. So anything you need, it's there. We've done it. We've written about it, and it's free and it's accessible online. So be happy to post some of it and then provide the links to give people access to the other parts of it.
Absolutely. And for our repository, we have like a web page that people could go to. And what we'll go ahead and do is, once you share some of that information, we'll go ahead and put it underneath your podcast thumbnail so people can just access it and go from there.
Sounds great.
And then your preferred method of contacting you would be your email. Is that correct?
That's the easiest thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. So
absolutely. So if you guys will listen to this in a podcast format, we'll include it in the show description. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, the same thing. Just go ahead in the description. You'll be able to contact Anthony that way. So Anthony, again, thank you so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it. I know you're extremely busy individual, and we're just thankful that you're able to share your insights with the group. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, we would greatly appreciate if you could like and subscribe. It really makes it impact in our ability to reach a broader audience. Along with that, if you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we would greatly appreciate if you could leave a 5-star review. It really does make an impact in the audience we're able to reach, and we thank you so much for your support. So thanks again so much for tuning in. And we'll
My
see you
pleasure. Keep up the good work, guys.
Oh, absolutely.
Great job.
Thank you, Anthony. See ya.